Awesome. Hi, everyone. We are now broadcasting to you live for a special webinar. We're going to allow a couple minutes for everyone to get a chance to join us, and we will start the webcast shortly. So please, come on in, sit down, grab a drink while everyone's getting situated. And if you have any other friends or coworkers that were interested to join us today, ping them, and we'll begin here in a couple minutes. Thank you. I can see a lot of folks joining us now, and all the howdies from all corners of the world are chiming in the stream chat here. As I mentioned, as you're joining us, we're just allowing a couple minutes for everyone to get a chance to join us, and we'll begin shortly. Thanks everyone for joining. We're about to begin in 1 minute. All righty. Um, Looks like a lot of folks have had a chance to join us, and we're in a good place to get started. It's been wonderful seeing all the messages come in on the stream right here. We got folks joining us all the way from Iran, Egypt, all the way to Wisconsin and San Diego. So it's great to see from folks from all over the world chiming in here. Glad to see Cypress users everywhere. Well, thanks for joining us, everybody. Today is going to be another great chance for us to see how folks use Cypress in the real world. Today, I have the privilege of being joined by David Mamujee, one of our colleagues from the company Faire, who's going to be telling us how him and his team are using Cypress in their day to day. I'm gonna allow David to take over to give the presentation is put together, and then we'll also have ample time for questions where David and I can chime in and help you all out. And so please realize we're using the Slido, the service for taking questions. So you can go to sli.do and type in this event code, CY Faire. It's in the yellow on the left-hand corner here, and you can start asking your questions there, and we'll be picking questions from there and using it for the Q&A section at the end of the presentation. This presentation will also be recorded, and it's currently being also streamed live on YouTube as well. And the slides will be available to everybody as well. So with all that said, let's go ahead and get started. If you didn't already know me, my name is Amir Rustamzadeh. I'm the Director of Developer Experience Engineering here at Cypress. And now I'm going to pass it on over to our friend, David. Take it away, David.
Sounds good. Thank you, Amir. So yeah, hello, everyone. I'm David. I am a front-end engineer here at Faire. Tell you a little bit about myself. So I'm currently working here from Faire in our Waterloo office up in Canada. I'm actually born and raised here in Waterloo, went to the University of Waterloo here for university, and now working here for Faire at Waterloo. If after this presentation you want to contact me for whatever reason, probably the best way to get a hold of me is going to my GitHub on github.com/dmamujee. And there you'll be able to find my up-to-date contact details and links to my LinkedIn. But yeah, so for this presentation, I appreciate the opportunity to come here and share our journey here at Faire of using Cypress on our end-to-end testing journey. So I'm just going to share a little bit about our story of implementing and how we've structured our end-to-end testing suite and how it fits into our existing tech stack, some issues and some ways we've had to deal with flaky tests and our solutions to dealing with them, and some ways that we leverage our end-to-end testing suite. And as Amir said, if people have any questions along the way, feel free to submit them on Slido, and you can use the event codes cy-faire to submit those questions. Yeah, for those who might not be familiar with Faire as a company, we are a wholesale marketplace. Our goal is to connect independent brands and retailers all over the world. And our goal is really to empower these entrepreneurs and give them the tools to really chase their dreams to run a small business. We were founded in 2017. 2017, yeah, just 4 years ago, and we've raised a whole bunch of money since that. I think it's over $650 million over the past 4 years. Most recently raising our Series F round in June, raising $260 million at a $7 billion valuation. So it's been a very fun ride, growing very fast. And we have some offices all over the world. We have our offices here in Kitchener. Like I mentioned, we also have an office in Toronto. Now, in the States, we have offices in San Francisco, Atlanta, and Salt Lake City. And then recently, we've expanded to Europe as well, as we have an office in London and soon to have an office in Amsterdam as well. Yeah, so about 2 years ago, we made the decision to start putting some time and effort to invest in end-to-end testing. But why did we make this decision? As it takes a non-trivial amount of time to set up the end-to-end test, to start writing end-to-end tests, and to also maintain the end-to-end test. So yeah, why do we want to do this in the first place? And our main goal was that we had existing like front-end tests on components and unit tests, and on the back end we had tests as well, like unit tests. But we didn't really have any way to test the entire application together with the front end interacting with the back end. And as we're constantly releasing code to production, at this time 2 years ago, we were releasing about maybe once a day or once every other day to production, doing releases. And today we're doing production releases multiple times a day. So when we're releasing very often, we want to make sure that all the core functionalities of the site are always functional. As I said, we're an online marketplace serving both sides. We serve both the retailers and the brands. So we want to ensure that people browsing the website, doing things like searching for products or logging in and creating accounts or checking out and adding items to their bag. There are many very core functionalities to the website that we want to make sure are always functional at all times. And previously, we didn't really have a very good way to verify this. What we had was every time someone would do a release to production, we had a testing script, and it was a list of steps they would have to go through. They would have to go sign up, they would have to create a new account, log in with that account, do all these steps of these core functionalities of the site to ensure that things were working for the new production release. And this list was quickly expanding as the application got more and more complex. And we realized that this was a really unscalable solution. We wanted to have an automated way to test this. So, and another reason actually we wanted to invest in some end-to-end testing was our team was really growing. So about 2 years ago, we had, I think, about 35 engineers, and the plan for us was for us to continue expanding. And you've seen this graph here. In the past 2 years, we've grown from about 35, 40 engineers. So we're now over 150 engineers. And the plan for us is for us to keep expanding at this rate. So with so many people working on the same code base and changes being made constantly, it really increases the complexity of the code, and it makes bugs a lot easier to create as people are working on the same code, and it's easier to make mistakes multiple people working on. So that was another reason we wanted to take some time to invest in end-to-end testing to make sure we have confidence when we're doing releases. And so once we decided that we wanted to take some time to invest in end-to-end testing, the next step was for us to choose our framework that we wanted to use. And I'm not going to go super in depth into our selection process. Honestly, it wasn't a super close race. Cypress actually was a pretty clear choice for us. We'd had a lot of people use them in the company in the past, and they were pretty happy with them. But one really good attribute for us that we found was that Cypress was super easy for us to spin up, super easy for us to use. And also, we don't have a designated test engineering team here at Faire. For me, as an example, I'm actually a front-end engineer, not a test engineer. And all the people who are going to be implementing the test, writing the test, and maintaining the test, these were going to be front-end engineers writing these tests. So we wanted to have a framework that was easy for people to ramp up and get started, and also sort of a similar tech stack to what we're using to our existing code. So we use React and TypeScript. So being able to write our end-to-end test in TypeScript was a big plus for us, so that people could easily jump in and have a good understanding of what's going on inside of the code. And another plus for us for Cypress was the use of the Cypress dashboard. I remember when we were doing some scoping, I was a big fan of it. It's really nice to be able to manage your tests and easily debug them inside of there. And the other thing was parallelization, of just being able to know that as we increase our test suite size, we don't have to worry about scalability and our build times really increasing as our test suite increases, but we know that Cypress can natively support parallelization, and it'll scale appropriately. So we made the decision to use Cypress as our choice for end-to-end testing framework. So the next step for us was to start writing some tests and start chipping away at the core functionalities that we wanted to cover. So at this time, when we were starting to write our tests, all of our front-end applications were in a mono-repo. So as I mentioned before, Faire is a marketplace where people can buy and sell products. So we actually deal with both sides of the marketplace, where we have an application where users can come and purchase products. And we then also have an application, a web application, where the brands can sell the products. So we have two different interfaces, one for buying and one for selling. And these were kind of two different functionalities. So initially we had a monorepo, and this is when in the monorepo, this is when we started to write our end-to-end test. And it's fairly simple then, as everything was inside of the monorepo. But then we made the decision to split our two applications into different repositories. So then, yeah, so we migrated to multiple repos with the different front-end areas. So then we did the same thing for our tests, where we had our tests for the front end, for the retailer side, for the marketplace side, inside of that repository. And then on the brand fulfillment side, we had our tests for those on the brand side. But when writing these tests, there are a lot of very common setup steps that we would have to do when writing these tests. As an example, let's say we wanted to write a test for a retailer ordering a product. So for that test, we would create a script where we would create a new retailer. We would have to create a brand, create a brand with products for the retailer to order, and all these general functions for setting up the state in order to run the test. These were very common these were similar implementations on each of the repositories. And as we were developing these different utilities, we found that sometimes, every once in a while, we would have bugs or mistakes, and we would try to fix it on one side, but sometimes we would fix it in one repository, not the other, and we had divergent implementations between the different repositories. And this was getting very confusing, very annoying, and kind of messy to work in as our suite is getting larger and larger as we're writing more tests. So we decided that, yeah, we wanted to create a singular repository for all of our end-to-end test utilities. So what we did is we moved, I guess kind of made an E2E monorepo where all of our end-to-end tests lived inside of a single repository, so that we could have our common utilities inside of there, and we would not have divergent implementations for these shared utilities. And in order to get the different front-end repos to access this end-to-end repo, we linked them together with a Git submodule. So the let's say the marketplace repository, then we would have a submodule linked to the master branch of the E2E repository, and then we would use Git hooks where we could update on master merges of the E2E repo, then it would automatically update the submodule reference in the other repositories. So this actually works very well for us, where we would have our common implementation. We can do our end-to-end development inside of the E2E repository, and then we can just pull that in for the live changes inside of the various front-end repositories. However, this did cause a little bit of an issue for us when we wanted to make breaking changes. As an example, if we have inside of the marketplace front-end repository, let's say we wanted to update a test where we wanted to update, let's say for the login button, when you click login, for whatever reason, we wanted to update the data test ID for the button that is getting clicked. And to submit that PR on the front end side, we would have to submit the PR to update the data test ID, but that PR would fail because it is pulling the test reference from our end-to-end repository, and that test definition is looking for a different data test ID. It's looking for a data test ID inside of that test. So when it tries to run the test inside a CI, that test would fail. And then, okay, so we need to go and update the test inside of our E2E repository. So we would then, you can go create a PR in the end-to-end repository, and then that PR would also fail to update to look for the new data test ID, because on the end-to-end repo, when it runs its CI, it is running against the master branch of the other repo. So we had this kind of chicken and an egg problem where both tests need to pass CI to merge. But they are both looking at they're both requiring different, I guess, conditions inside of the test. So one of them has to get merged first. So this is an issue that we kind of have with the submodule, where it's very annoying to make breaking changes to the end-to-end tests. So the way we get around this is inside of the front-end repo where we want to make the breaking change, we have to update the submodule reference to point to our E2E PR. And then that will allow us to update the test definition that CI is running against as we're updating the submodule reference. And then on the E2E PR side, we can then, after the other one merges, we can then rerun that CI and it'll point to the new master of the test definition. And that then after that merges, it'll auto update the submodule reference. However, this does open the possibility for some race conditions. If multiple people do this at once, we have had that happen a couple times. So what we're currently trying to move towards is away from this Git submodules. We want to move the test definitions back into the individual repos, but we want to create an internal NPM package with our shared E2E utilities. So for the common implementations of setting up our test data, of creating products, creating brands, creating retailers, we're going to put this implementation inside of an internal package and then allow the different repositories to access those directly. Yeah, and this is just a little, in terms of our implementation, when I was preparing for this presentation, I was going through our dashboard, and this is something that really kind of blew my mind in terms of how much test parallelization has really saved us time. This is over the past year. I think as our test suite has really expanded, I think we are up to about 250 tests right now. But our runtime is still, it shows your average 14 minutes. I usually find it takes about 12 or 13. But the number that's really staggering to me here is the fact that just in the past year, we've saved over 23 years from the parallelization, which is just a staggering number to me. So it's super cool to be able to really take advantage of the test parallelization here. But yeah, so we've had some issues with flaky test management, especially at the beginning of writing our test. Yeah, let's get into it a little bit here. So when we first implemented our tests, we run our tests against our live staging environment. And yeah, there are a few like pros and cons to doing this. So some of the pros of running against our staging environment, it was really easy for us to set up and configure. So the way we do our localhost development is we have a proxy server run, so we build our local development files to run for a local host server, and then we create a proxy to our staging server for the backend. So we don't have to worry about running a local backend, we're running a local host server. So this worked really well when we were just setting up our initial end-to-end test to run in CI, where it could just do the same front-end development, just create a front-end build and proxy to our staging backend. So it was super easy to set up. And also for our backend, it auto deploys to staging. So this ensures that we would always have the latest changes would auto update on staging, and we don't have to worry about updating our backend reference. And in our staging environment, the idea is, while it is staging, the configuration isn't always exactly like production in terms of the data. Our goal is to really have it closely resemble production as much as possible, as the idea is staging is just the new version, newest commits before they go out to production. So it's really nice to know that when we're testing against staging, it's very close to what our production builds will be like. And this is kind of a side benefit to us using staging, is as we've been running our tests against staging, we've actually found some bugs and some breakages in our configuration and the way our backup or configuration is set up in our staging environment, as the end-to-end tests running end-to-end tests against staging have shown some holes in our configuration. But yeah, there've been some downsides for us running against staging. And so it's really prone to transient breakages of running our tests. As it's staging, people are always using it at all times, changing things around. And sometimes staging goes down or things break or they're bad merges or bad commits causing it to go down. And that's really detrimental for our end-to-end test. As if staging goes down, then all the tests are just going to start failing. And also we use some third-party providers, and sometimes their staging environments or staging endpoints can go down, and that causes our test to fail. So that can be super annoying when we're running against staging. The other thing is, as it is a staging environment, people are testing things out, and sometimes inadvertently people can modify configuration values and inadvertently break some sort of functionality, causing tests to fail. And staging data can also sometimes be a little bit unstable, as sometimes we're doing like database migrations. This has been a common thing for us, where if we're running database migrations on staging, that sometimes our staging data is so huge, especially after running so many end-to-end tests. Database migrations can be really slow, causing slowdowns in endpoints as we're trying to access the database at the same time as the migration. But yeah, so it was super easy for us to get up and running for staging, but it caused us a few headaches running our tests against staging environment. Yeah, so it's a little bit of a side note here. I'm going to talk about the Cypress Cucumber preprocessor. I promise this is related to flaky test management. So if you go to the Cypress site under the plugins tab, this is one of the plugins that's listed on the site, and this is something that we've been using for a while. If you're unfamiliar with Cucumber, I would recommend checking it out. It's kind of like a regex, modifier in terms of matching definitions to test definitions. So the way it works is it allows you to write human readable definitions of test scenarios. So as an example here, this is one of our test cases for orders. And this is what the test is doing. So these individual lines will map to a TypeScript function. And these functions can be parameterized, and they can be modified to have a different, both like number parameters and word parameters to modify the functionality. But it's really nice where it really shows what the test is doing in human readable language. So this allows not only engineers to be able to easily see what the test is doing, but it also allows non-technical people, such as product managers, to come in and look at the tests, and they can see exactly what test coverage we have inside of these end-to-end tests. And it's also super nice where we can reuse these. As an example, like on line 4 here, for like given a brand exists and the brand has 5 products, like that's a very common background step that we do at the beginning of a test, where we need to create a brand and create products for that brand for the test to interact with. So it's really nice for reusability as well, where we can just, if someone hasn't done this before, they know they can just come and copy paste this, and those step definitions will work, and they just import the common step definitions, and then they're ready to go. And one of the cool features in the Cypress and the Cucumber preprocessor is the ability to add test tags. And this is something that we've used a lot. So as an example here on this orders test, you can see here for the return order, we can tag it with something like @ignore and @flaky. And this allows us to categorize the tests. And I think I'm pretty sure you can apply multiple tags to a test and categorize them accordingly. So yeah, if you haven't checked out the Cypress Cucumber preprocess, I would highly recommend it. It's a super cool library, and yeah, we really liked using it. So why this is relevant, the way we're using this was when we first started to, after we had written a few tests, initially we had them running in CI along with our builds, but they weren't blocking PRs. And we wanted to start blocking the PRs on these end-to-end tests. But we had the issue where they weren't completely reliable, especially like some tests were more reliable than others. And we had the cases where a test would be working just fine, and then there would be some sort of change in the front end or the back end, and then it would cause the test to become a little bit more flaky. So what our solution for this was, we created these buckets where we called them stable and flaky tests, where we would block PRs on stable tests, and we would not block PRs on flaky tests. And the benefit of this was that we were able to, using the tags, it was a very like quick change where we could, if we found a test was starting to become a little bit flaky, we could quickly just go and add the flaky tag, and then it'll move it into the flaky bucket. And then even if you don't know what the problem is right away, this will unblock people from merging their PRs, as this flaky test will be taken out of the stable bucket and it shouldn't be relevant for blocking the PRs anymore. And then when it goes into the flaky bucket, then people can take the chance when they have some time. They can go and investigate why the test was flaky. For us personally, we found a big source of flakiness, especially at the beginning when we were writing the tests. We were figuring out how to write good end-to-end tests and sort of, the way to do that. And a big thing we found was that we were often not waiting on the appropriate things inside the test. And there were race conditions where we were looking to interact with something that wasn't ready to be interacted with. So we learned that we would really have to do psi weights, which I guess are now psi intercepts, on backend endpoint calls to ensure that the next step of the interaction with the UI is ready to go once the backend is complete. But yeah, so we have a rotation of what we call a front end on call engineer, and they would monitor the results of the tests. And I think we were using the Slack integration where it would post the results of tests into a Slack channel. So it's super easy to monitor what tests were passing, what tests were failing. And you could like see patterns like, oh, if a test had been failing a little bit often, maybe move it into the flaky bucket. And as a really easy way to view these changes, we actually created a dashboard where we could view the pass rate of different tests. So this is a little screenshot of just a couple tests. And as an example, so this would be an example where this third test here, we can see that the pass rate of it hasn't been very good so far recently. So when we saw something like this, we'd say, okay, this test hasn't been reliable. Let's move it into the flaky bucket. And then we'd move it into the flaky bucket. The goal is that we would want to we wouldn't want tests to live in the flaky bucket for forever. The reason we have a test is we want to be testing something and put it back into the stable and blocking PRs on the result of these tests. But sometimes we don't have the time or the bandwidth to fix these tests or investigate why a test is flaky right away. So then we would have the ability where we can move them into the flaky bucket, or we could also just ignore them until we have time to fix them. And then once we come up with a solution for improving the stability of the test, we wouldn't graduate it right back into the stable category right away. What we'd actually do is we would have a period, usually at least 1 week, as the flaky tests are still going to get run on PRs, though they aren't blocked. We can use this as a way to test, hey, are these tests actually still flaky? I'm actually stable now, or is it still flaky? So we could still see the pass rate of that. And then if I think our threshold was, I think it was like 95% or something like that. If it is over that for over a week, then we could promote it back into the stable category. So this is this infrastructure that we built about a year ago, but it's funny, Cypress actually kind of beat us to the punch with natively supporting, and I think it's Cypress 5.0, when it added the ability for test retries and flaky test management natively inside of Cypress. So this actual functionality is actually terms of us using the flaky and stable buckets for blocking tests is this is actually deprecated for us now inside of our test infrastructure. But we still use tags for other reasons. So we run our tests not only in desktop, but we do it some on mobile, on tablet. And some of the tests aren't relevant for mobile or tablet, or some of them just don't work very well or need some fixing to work on mobile. So what we can do is we can add like an ignore mobile or ignore tablet tag, and then that will signify that, hey, when we do a mobile end-to-end test run, we can skip this test, we can exclude it from the testing suite. Yeah. So yeah, the battle for us to reduce flake is never really over. It seems like there's always ways we can improve the stability of our tests. And one thing we're currently working on is running our test suite against a local backend instance. So one source of our flake is often like running against staging. There's network flake. There's also, like I said, transient failures on staging. And one thing we want to we're kind of doing a beta test right now is running our test suite against a local backend build. So this will reduce the source of network errors when we're running our tests. And this will also eventually lead us into, we want to run our end-to-end tests on backend PRs as well. As right now, we're only running them on front-end PRs, but the goal is we want to use this infrastructure to eventually run them on backend PRs to ensure that backend changes don't cause any regressions to the front-end experience. So yeah, this is one thing that we're currently working on, initiative. And then a newer initiative we have, which I'm personally really excited about, is we're running, we're trying to only run relevant tests for PR. So as an example, like, so as I mentioned, we've really increased the number of tests in our suite. So on the retailer side and on our marketplace side, I think when I last looked, it was about 200 or 255 tests in that suite. And that's a lot of tests to run. And sometimes when you're just making a very small trivial change, it can be really annoying if, let's say, you're just modifying something, going back to the same example of the sign-up flow, where you're just changing a button in the sign-up flow. But there is some flake that caused an order writing end-to-end test to fail. And that is completely unrelated to the change that you're making, but it's causing your PR to not be merged, to be unmerged when I have to rerun the test suite again. So what we're doing right now is creating a relevancy map on all end-to-end tests on the master builds of the end-to-end repo, where it creates a relevancy map when we run the test. We then store what files are being used when running the end-to-end test. So then when we open a PR, we can then look at the git diff to see what files are being changed. And then we compare that back to the end-to-end tests that use those files. So then in order to, well, one, reduce like the possibility for unrelated flake, we only run the relevant test for that PR, but it also reduces the runtime of the CI when running the PR, as it's only going to run a lot less tests for smaller PRs, as it's only going to look at the related tests. So that's something that is actually a pretty recent change for us, and so far it's been working really well, and I've been a really big fan of it. It's really cool and really speeds up our development. Yeah, so I'm gonna take some time here to talk about some ways that we try to leverage our end-to-end suite. So here at Faire, one of our core values is seek the truth, and one way that really manifests is we are very data-driven in a lot of the decisions we make, especially with making changes to the application and different features. We do a lot of A/B tests, and we have a lot of internal, what we call settings. And these settings these setting values can be, like I said, experimentation flags. These can just be feature flags for turning features on and off, and different configuration values. And these, we have an internal settings framework, and this is and it's sort of instantaneous change. We don't have to open a PR to modify a configuration. And this can be one that's really convenient, where you can just flip a switch and modify a configuration value. But it also can be a little bit scary and a little bit disruptive at times, modifying configurations. We've had many cases where someone will modify a setting value, and there is some edge case that will break some functionality that they didn't quite think about. And it might be not even something that they're looking for, because it's an edge case they didn't think about. And it can break some other functionality, or it could break our end-to-end test suite, as it can change the experience inside of the application. So this was a very common problem for us, where we had the modification of configuration values, either breaking our end-to-end testing suite, or breaking functionality in the application. So one thing that we did is we built as we built into our framework the ability to run the end-to-end test suite with the updated configuration value without actually updating configuration. So anytime you go to update a setting value, what you can do is you can actually run the end-to-end test suite with the new updated value, and then it'll go off and run it. And then we have a little internal PR bot that will send you a message with the results of those tests. So then when you actually do flip that setting on, then you can be sure that, you're not going to be breaking anything. And things are going to be working. But one, you're not going to be breaking any functionality in the application, and also you're not going to be breaking any tests by turning that switch on. And coming back to the Cucumber preprocessor, this is something that has been really handy for us for really writing lots of tests and creating verbose tests. So just recently, this past year, we have expanded into Europe, and of the many technical difficulties of expanding into Europe, one of them was localizing our application, so serving our application in different languages, and also supporting different currencies as well, and displaying different currencies appropriately. So this is something that Cucumber preprocessor made really easy for us, for these abilities to have data tables like this and parameterize the different fields being passed in. So this is an example of our sign-in test for signing up with different countries. And it allows us to easily define many different test scenarios, as we can just put in the different countries, the different languages, the different prices. And it's very quick and easy, one to define the tests, as when after you write it once, of writing being able to accept the different countries and prices and zip codes, you can just add in as many as you want, and it's just more in terms of efficiency of the test suite. And then writing it like this, it also allows us to easily have a large test coverage, as we combine this with our different mobile, tablet, and like desktop test runs. The combinatorics, it can very quickly increase our test coverage, which is really, really handy and really nice to know that we have these tests ensuring the quality of these different languages and different currencies. And this is another recent change that we've added into our end-to-end testing suite, is testing of emails, where as part of our end-to-end test, we'll test that an email is properly triggered. We can fetch the HTML using our APIs and get the content of the emails, and ensure that the interaction is working properly. As an example, one of the tests that we have is our reset password flow. So if a user is in the website and they click the reset password inside of the UI, We can then, inside of our test, check that they received that email, that the content inside of that email, they have their reset password link. We can then open that reset password link inside the end-to-end test, inside of the Cypress test. It'll then open that link, enter their new password, and then we can go back to the website and ensure that they are able to log into the site with their new password after resetting it. So this has been something that's very, very nice for us, but we can test not only the triggering of our transactional emails, but we can also know that our email infrastructure is working properly as well. And yeah, lastly, this is really like the culmination of all the work that we do for end-to-end testing is for continuous deployment, as this is really, the primary metric for us is giving us confidence to release the product to production and not be scared that the core functionality of the site is broken, as can be very detrimental to not only the users, as it's a lot of our customers, they rely on Faire to operate their business. So it's very disruptive to them and also very annoying to them, as we all know. When trying to use a broken website, it's very frustrating. But also on the business side for us, there is like theoretical lost revenue if things are working properly and people aren't able to purchase products. So it gives us a more robust infrastructure as well. And yeah, we've already started to deploy some of our front-end applications continuously relying on end-to-end tests, and the goal is to get there for all of our front-end applications and eventually the backend as well, so we can just release automatically with confidence and we don't have to worry about it. I think now we have some time for questions, if I'm right.
Yes, awesome. Well, thank you so much, David, for that wonderful presentation and showing everyone how Faire has been using Cypress in their day-to-day. Now we're going to go into the Q&A portion of the webcast. Folks have been chiming in on Slido, so if you have questions, get them in there. Folks, please start upvoting books. People are already doing so, so please keep on doing that, and we'll go through some Slido questions. I also did notice some questions in the Zoom chat as well, so I kind of kept tabs on some of those, and I'll be happy to answer some of them. I also noticed some kind of chit chat of around certain topics that I think it'll be helpful for me to chime in on and give some people some additional details and context there. So with all that said, let's go into answering the top questions so far. So David, feel free to take some of these on and share with us, how Faire has kind of dealt with some of these things, and I'll be happy to chime in and give some additional insight as well. So the first one is, how do you control your test data?
Yeah, so I would say this is something that we're still, I would say we have a comprehensive solution for, as we are running so many tests constantly on PRs. And the tests do create a lot of test data with creating test retailers and test brands. This is something that does populate our staging database. And we have created some infrastructure to, let's say for searching, we ignore end-to-end test brands when searching for things inside of our staging database. So we've created some filters in terms of filtering it out. But this is something that it's also another reason why we want to eventually move towards a local backend instance, so we don't have to worry about populating our staging database with a whole bunch of test data, as it can get a little bit annoying sometimes to have all this end-to-end test data populating it. But we have had some efforts to create filters to ignore the end-to-end testing data.
There we go.
I can't quite hear you, Amir. Okay, yeah. There we go. I was a little worried there for a second. I don't know if that was my side.
No, you're all good. Let's go off to the next question. So how do you deal with end-to-end tests that end up making requests that may create, update, or delete data in third-party APIs? I'm not sure if you have to deal with that situation your test suites?
Yeah, I don't, to my knowledge, I don't think we have any tests that end up making requests to third-party APIs. There is one that comes to mind where we would make like GET requests. We wouldn't have to create or update any data from third-party APIs, but we would do GET requests. And that was one of the ones where we had in the flaky bucket. What we ended up doing actually is we just ended up, because sometimes that service would go down and it would cause like failures where their staging endpoints wouldn't be working. So we ended up just mocking out the get endpoint as it didn't really affect the functionality of our test, where we were just able to mock it out and use the result of that. So yeah, it hasn't been something we've had to deal with very much, but it's just once we mocked out the response.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, the other thing to consider here is that if folks are interacting with third-party services, of course, it depends what those services are, right? A lot of the times you would have kind of test accounts under those services, so you can, mutate things in a safe manner. There's also, if you're dealing with an authentication service, you would have probably already had like a test user provisioned in there where you can create, update, or delete that particular user. So whenever you're dealing with third-party entities, you do want to make sure that you've provisioned them in a safe, situation. So you're not, dealing with payment systems or auth systems that are on the production side of things. This is kind of a very general question, so it's very hard to kind of figure out where to approach it. But if you can feel free to reach out to us on Twitter, and if you're happy to chime in to something that you're dealing with in particular. Cool. So let's go on to the next question, which is how do you deal with iframes in Cypress? So I can probably take that on, David. So I assume you're talking about cross-origin iframes because Cypress can already handle like just iframes. The one that keeps coming up is cross-origin iframes. And answering this will also answer a plethora of other questions that I saw come in the Zoom chat, which is effectively how will Cypress handle dealing with multiple domains. So if you don't already know, one of the limitations that exists is that within a given it block, it test statement, you can only deal with one top level domain. But we're fixing that. We're improving that. The team is currently working on multi-domain support for Cypress. So this will also apply to iframes as well. So this would, remedy this current drawback that we have. Cool. We can go to the next one. Another broad question here. How do you clean your database after the test run? There's like 1,000 ways to go about doing this. David, do you have to deal with this?
Yeah, so I think this is kind of related to the previous question where right now we actually don't do any cleaning of the database right after the test run. This is kind of like a batch thing that we do every once in a while to clean up our staging data, to clean up our test data. But this is also, like I said, one of the reasons why we want to migrate towards a local backend instance, because if we then use a local backend instance, once all the tests are done running, we can just throw away the local database and we don't have to worry about that populating any of our actual staging databases. It's just done locally. So yes, we don't do any like cleaning of the staging database right now, but that is one of the reasons why we want to eventually move to a local backend instance.
Yeah. And the other thing I can chime in here is that, at Cypress, when we do our own testing for our own systems, we typically don't test against production databases or anything like that. In our CI pipeline, we're using a database that's been provisioned just for that instance for testing. And when it comes to deleting it, well, you can delete it directly. Truncate table is always a thing you can do. But you can also abstract that away with APIs that can clean up your database. One of the other things we do, especially for some of our end-to-end tests, is you can actually keep track of all the tables that have been mutated while under test, and then you can just truncate the changes in those tables. So there's a lot of ways you can go about doing this. This actually touches on a broader topic of data seeding and data initialization, which is something we're going to be providing more prescriptive guidance around. Cool. The next question, a surprising one, I must say, which is that I am a manual QA, but have spent the last 6 months writing Cypress tests. How do I overcome imposter syndrome, thinking I'm not an automated QA and feel confident? Well, I think you should feel confident because you've picked up a new skill and you're providing a lot of value to your team and the company. So I applaud you for doing that, and you should totally feel confident. Seems like you're already making contributions. Keep on doing so. There's no reason to feel like you are less than. Cypress was kind of built from the ground up to help everybody actually do testing because we understood the true pain of doing this type of testing correctly. And with the Cypress's API and documentation from day one, we're super targeted towards everybody that is trying to pick up these new skills. So I applaud you for that. If you're not an imposter, you belong here. Cool. If you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to me about that in particular. Next one, I'm waiting for the stream here to. There we go. There it is. How do you scale your E2E test to run parallel while not causing issues with other tests? Great question. I got a lot to say about that, but David, go ahead.
Sure. Yeah. So we actually had some issues with this. So I don't know how familiar people are with the parallelization framework and how it works on the Cypress side. But we had issues where we had some spec files that were super, super long. And as they were parallelized per spec file, we found that it was a single test that was causing like our parallelized runs to be a lot longer. So we actually found like writing smaller spec files and breaking up the tests really increased our parallelized efficiency to ensure that we were able to fully break them up onto separate machines and have them be independent, so that we could fully utilize the power of parallelization.
Yeah. So this is kind of a broad topic, and we've kind of documented extensively. One of the first things I worked on here at Cypress was the parallelization infrastructure. So the top thing we kind of say when you're adopting parallelization, especially with end-to-end tests, is that you got to make sure your tests do not coincide with each other, that they can be executed in an isolated fashion. And this way, you don't have to deal with multiple tests mutating the same thing at the same exact time. So you don't want to be modifying the same database row or the same database entity, right, at the very same time. So you got to make sure you're in a good place to actually parallelize. One ways you can do this is that a machine, you have a dedicated database provision just for that machine itself. But if you have multiple machines coming online and testing, let's say, a single testing database, that's going to make it kind of hard to do parallelization because you got multiple machines running different tests, trying to mutate the same thing at the same time. So you really want to create that isolation at the test level and at your CI pipeline level as well. So keep track of that when you're adopting parallelization. Cool. Let's go off to the next question is, how do you deal with third-party authentication rerouting to a different URL from that origin? Great question. And this is one of those topics that touches on multi-domain. So once we have multi-domain, you won't have to worry about this. Now, the thing is that if you check out our the testing strategy section in our documentation, we've kind of outlined how you can programmatically authenticate with third-party authentication providers such as Auth0, Okta, Google, so on and so forth, in a programmatic way, where your tests can actually still be fast and efficient and still kind of allowing you to get the same level of confidence. So go into your documentation, go into the testing strategy section, and you'll see some guides that can help you there. Cool. Let's go off to the next thing is, do you use Cypress for performance testing? Lighthouse. David, I'm not sure if you do any performance testing in your neck of the woods.
No, we don't. We don't use Cypress for performance testing.
Yeah, this is currently not a first-class kind of use case for Cypress. Does not mean we're not thinking about it, wink, wink. But it is something that we see people doing all the time. We use Lighthouse internally here at Cypress. But to answer your question, no. The next one is, do you ever mock endpoints? I think we already kind of answered this one, so we can go to this. This was kind of brought up before. Next question is, do you have any challenges with authentication and getting past your own security references? Again, they're probably the same question actually, because it's around auth. So again, I advise you to check into how we are recommending programmatic auth within our documentation. So go into the testing strategy section, the sidebar, and you'll see some guides that can help you there. And the patterns we're using there are repeatable for any auth service that you're using. Cool. Let's go to the next one. It says, how do you manage mocking? Do you use sign or sept much, or do you have a separate mock server or do you use live endpoints? So David, do you do any mocking?
Yeah, so I think I mentioned before, we did some mocking on some external endpoints, and we do some, I can't quite remember what our use cases are, but I've definitely seen it in the code. And to my memory, I think we do use Intercept for most of them when we're mocking out our endpoints and mocking the responses. But I can't say I've had a huge amount of experience with doing it personally.
Yeah. So mocking, of course, it's kind of a broad term. You can do it any way. But since you mentioned Intercept, I assume you mean network level stubbing or mocking, as we like to say. So Intercept is our latest API for handling network level mocking. If you're an old enough Cypress user, by old I mean a few months, we used to have a different API called the side.route API, which you could do this. Intercept is the next generation version of that. It has much more capabilities. It's way more flexible. And that is what we recommend for you to handle network level mocking. And we got a lot of good docs around that as well. So if you're looking to do network level mocking, side.intercept is your friend. Cool. Next question. What reporting tools do you use to track your automatically triggered test runs? I got a big answer for that, David, but what do you use?
Yeah, I would say there are like three main tools that we use for reporting. So one was that mode dashboard I gave a glimpse of before, where it kind of breaks down the daily like pass rate of each test. I think that's kind of been deprecated for us now, as we use the Cypress dashboard mostly for everything, as they have all the analytics inside of there for test runs, and especially the flaky test rate. I think that's the biggest one I usually look for. And then the Slack integration, I think that's one that's really useful, where especially it'll post failed test runs inside of its channel, so it's really easy to monitor the health of a specific project and easily see if tests are failing repeatedly, or if things are all green.
So the next question is, I guess this one's for me. Can Amir provide any updates on what we can expect from Cypress in the next 6 months? Wow, who are you? Do you work here?
I want to hear this too. I'm excited.
Great question. We got various teams working on different projects. One of the big things that you can expect to see from us is component testing, which is one of our primary focuses at the moment. And I did see some folks ask about that in the Zoom chat as well. So that is something we're all very focused on, and we're looking forward to getting that out to everyone soon. It's already available in an experimental fashion. So please, go ahead. You can download Cypress today. You can try it out. We got some preliminary docs for it. I've done a couple of quick kind of little presentations on it already on YouTube. So you can check that out, start utilizing it, and you can expect for us to make it generally available soon. Beyond that, as I mentioned, we're working on things like multi-domain support, which is really going to provide a lot of new use cases. The team is also working on WebKit support, which effectively means Safari support. And those are just some of the things off the top of my head. We've also released some new APIs recently that the teams worked hard on, which is the new Sessions API, which for all those folks asking about authentication, if you want to make your authentication even more efficient, I highly suggest checking out our new Sessions API, and that is available in an experimental flag at the moment, and we're going to make that generally available soon as well. So I highly suggest you check that out. And those are some of the things off the top of my head. Of course, we're working on a lot of things on the cloud dashboard service offering that we have. So expect to see more from that soon as well. Cool. So the next one is, can you talk about design patterns used for the automation code? That's kind of a very nebulous question. So I'm not sure how to go about approaching it, but I will say one thing, and David, if you have anything to say about that, let me know. Again, this is a big topic. I did see the mention of page object pattern being mentioned in the Zoom chat. And I also did mention, did you see someone mention that, hey, Cypress is saying that, hey, don't use page object patterns. This is kind of a little bit of a rumor, which maybe to our own fault that has kind of got out, is you can totally use page object patterns with Cypress. It's a completely valid pattern to adopt and use. We see people do it all the time. A lot of folks coming from Selenium-based tooling are used to that pattern. You can totally do that using Cypress. So there's a completely valid way and pattern to utilize Cypress. but this is a bigger topic, and I'm sure we'll cover that in depth in upcoming docs. Next thing, have you had a use case to run different parts of the suite for multiple environments and user profiles, David?
Yeah, so this is actually a pretty common thing in our test cases. Even in some of the sample ones I showed earlier, where we have interactions between retailers and brands when we're setting up our accounts, as we have retailers ordering products and brands fulfilling the orders. And we need both sides of those to be set up in order to run the test. So this was actually something we did have a little bit some speed bumps along the way in terms of properly managing sessions of creating of the retailer doing interactions and the brand doing interactions. But we found that the built-in Cypress tools of like clearing cookies and clearing sessions did the trick for us and allowed us to easily switch between the different contexts within the tests.
Awesome. And yeah, I mean, doing this testing in multiple environments, you're gonna have to do this. I think everybody probably has to do this. If you want to see this done in a real world kind of situation, and I saw someone mention this in the Zoom chat, we have our flagship demonstration app. You can just Google Cypress Real World app, and you can see us doing that within our CI system, where we're testing the same UI within different environments under different contexts. So that's a really fantastic resource, and you should all utilize that. And that demo application is something we keep up to date with the latest versions of what we're thinking about in terms of practices, and also Cypress's latest functionality as well. Cool. So we only have a couple more minutes, and we're going to have wrap it up, but we'll maybe get a couple more questions in. It says that if the content is behind a login portal, is it standard practice to log in again with each test case, or is there a way to maintain a session? I may have just pre-answered this question with the mentioning of the experimental sessions API we've had. So, and this touches on what David and I were talking about around parallelization, which is you gotta, if you want to do parallelization, to its maximum potential, you got to keep your tests as isolated as possible. But if and that typically means you're logging in over and over within your test. So that's something that's required. But you can really make that efficient by maintaining a session, and the new sessions API can give you that. And so that is what we recommend. Cool. So I think the next thing is about parallelization, which I think we've already covered, and the next one's about multiple environments, which I think we've already covered. Let's see. This one, I think, what was the biggest takeaway after moving away from a monorepo strategy? I know my team now has our internal debates about this all the time. How about you, David?
Yeah, so there are a lot of internal debates. It's still a hot topic inside of our engineering team. I personally I like having the breaking up the different repos. It's a lot easier to manage releases, manage commits. We have a lot of different microservices too internally in terms of our internal web components and common functions and stuff like that. So we have a lot of generalization to internal packages as well that we use. So it's really easy actually, where working between the different repos, there's a lot of common implementation in our I guess they're internal external libraries that allow us to make it have a very common implementation between the different repos. So I'm personally a fan of it, and yeah, I like it.
Awesome. I won't add to the debate there for monorepos. Cool. So I think that's unfortunately all the time we have for today. We've already kind of gone a little bit over, but thank you everyone for joining us, and thank you so much, David, for putting this all together. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, from all the questions and everything coming through the Zoom chat, it looks like everybody got some value out of this. So thanks again. This presentation will be made available, and so will the recording as well. And feel free to reach out to us at any time. I'm Amir Rustamzadeh on Twitter, and you can feel free to reach out to me there. Thank you.